In his article Petronarratology, Bart Welling argues that oil is fundamentally a story problem. The way we talk about oil, the narratives we tell, shapes how we use it, how we think about it, and how we might transition away from it. Welling's important insight is simple but powerful. We cannot solve the climate crisis just by changing technology. We also need to change the stories we tell. Today, we will discuss what petronarratology means, how stories about oil work, and what we can do to tell better stories. Petronarratology is a fancy word for studying oil stories. It combines oil, with narratology, the study of narratives. The field asks, how do stories about oil shape our world? How can we use storytelling to help people imagine life beyond fossil fuels? Welling builds on the work of scholars like Amitav Ghosh, who wrote in 1992 that oil is the undercurrent of all narrations. In other words, oil is everywhere in modern stories, but it's often invisible, like the background music in a movie that you don't notice until it stops. Welling introduces an important concept, the myth of energy, with capital E, to show it is a special kind of story. This is the powerful narrative that makes fossil fuels seem natural, inevitable, and essential to modern life. How does the myth work? The myth of energy does several things. First, it uses euphemisms. Calling oil energy makes it sound clean and abstract, like the energy you get from food. It hides the fact that oil comes from ancient life forms, involves horrific extraction processes, and destroys ecosystems. Second, it transforms history into nature. Barthes famously said, myth transforms history into nature. This means the myth makes oil development seem like it just happened, not like it was the result of specific human choices. It makes our dependence on oil seem unchangeable. Third, it promises a magical life. The Polish journalist Kapuscinski brilliantly described how oil feels like a fairy tale, a filthy, foul smelling liquid that squirts obligingly up in the air and falls back into the earth as a rustling shower of money. Oil promises life without work, life for free. Fourth, it creates innocent consumers. When you watch an ExxonMobil commercial that says energy makes our lives possible, you are being told that oil is as natural as blood flowing through your veins. You are not responsible for the damage, you are just a happy beneficiary. You might think that telling scary stories about climate change would break the myth of energy. But Welling argues that apocalyptic narratives also make us feel helpless. When we hear that the world is ending, many of us just shut down. We think if it's all doomed anyway, why bother changing? Both the myth of energy and apocalyptic stories share something. They make us feel powerless. The myth says we can't live without oil. Apocalyptic stories say we are already doomed. Neither helps us take action. To counter these unhelpful narratives, Welling draws on bioregionalism, a grassroots movement that encourages people to inhabit their local places. What is bioregionalism? Bioregionalism means first, understanding your local ecosystem, second, caring for the specific place where you live, third, building local economies that work with nature, not against it, fourth, telling stories that connect people to their places. Welling also introduces re-inhabitation. Re-inhabitation is the central idea. It means both physically living in a place in a sustainable way and mentally rethinking how we understand that place. Early bioregionalists defined bioregion as both a geographical terrain and a terrain of consciousness, both the physical place and the ideas we have about how to live there. Welling argues that we need re inhabitory stories. narratives that help people reconnect with their places and communities. These stories don't just attack oil companies, instead, they acknowledge their own dependence on oil, find common ground with people who disagree with them, respect non human life and ecosystems, and tell hopeful stories about local action. Welling identifies 6 characteristics of stories that can help us move beyond oil addiction. Let's look at each one through examples from 2 books. David Gessner's The Turbal Chronicles about BP oil spill and Stephanie Leigh Menager's Living Oil, a scholarly memoir about oil culture. First, acknowledging personal debts to oil. Both authors admit that they are part of the problem. Gessner drives his car to the Gulf to write about oil spill using a refined version of the same substance that is still pouring out into the Gulf waters. He knows he is a hypocrite and he tells us openly. Lemenager begins her book by talking about her father, a part time oil man who waxes poetic about the Tea Party. She doesn't like his politics, but she acknowledges that her family has always been connected to oil. This honesty builds trust. Readers cannot dismiss these authors as self righteous environmentalists who think they are above the fray. Second, owning up to how environmental thinking is enmeshed in oil. Lay Manager shows that even environmentalism is soaked in oil. The 1969 Santa Barbara oil spill helped launch the modern environmental movement, but the activists who protested still depended on oil for their cars, their homes, and their lifestyles. Gessner points out that nature writers, including himself, depend on oil to travel to the wild places they write about. Oil is solar energy from eons ago. He notes dead plants compressed by time. Environmentalists should be grateful for what oil has made possible, even as they fight to move beyond it. Third, making room for voices of ordinary people. Both books include conversations with people who don't share the author's politics. Gessner befriends Ryan Lambert, a conservative hunting guide who loves shooting birds but also loves the Louisiana wetlands. Lambert is passionate about coastal restoration. His love of place is deeper than his politics. These conversations don't resolve political differences, but they build bridges. They show that love of place can transcend ideological divides, a crucial insight for anyone trying to build a movement for energy transition. Fourth, taking non human beings seriously. Gessner describes encounters with actual oiled pelicans, not just theoretical birds from news reports. He watches oysters recolonizing the Gulf with human help. These animals are not just symbols, they are neighbors. This neighborliness towards non human beings helps Gessner see possibilities for collaboration. Oysters filter water, create habitat, and stop erosion. Humans can help them do their work. The partnership benefits everyone. 5. Rethinking petroleum as a character. In Leigh Menager's book, oil itself becomes something to think with, not just an abstract commodity. She visits the La Brea tar pits where oil seeps naturally from the ground. In these small, messy seeps, oil makes itself visible as a material presence that cannot be easily reduced to the abstraction of energy. When you see oil up close, sticky, smelly, black, it's harder to believe the myth of energy. Oil is not a magical force, it is a physical substance with real consequences. 6. Describing physical encounters with unprocessed hydrocarbons. Both authors describe direct encounters with raw oil. These encounters break the spell of the myth. They rematerialize something that oil industry tries to make invisible, the actual substance that comes out of the ground. Gessner visits the Gulf during the BP spill. He sees the oil, he smells it, he meets people whose lives have been destroyed by it. These physical encounters make the problem real in a way that statistics cannot. One of Welling's most important arguments is about political polarization. In the United States, climate change has become a partisan issue. Many conservatives see environmentalists as elitist outsiders who don't care about jobs or economic security. Re-inhabitory stories offer a way through this impasse. By focusing on love of place rather than abstract ideology, they can connect with people across political lines. Lambert may not call himself an environmentalist, but he wants to restore the wetlands where he's fished since childhood. That is a starting point. Gessner and Lehmenager also avoid the trap of being from a position of moral purity. They admit their own guilt. They don't claim to have easy answers. This humility makes them more credible and more persuasive. Welling ends with a quote from Ammon's poem, Dunas. Firm ground is not available ground. This is a powerful message for our time. We cannot return to pre-oil world. We cannot pretend we are innocent. We are all part of this mess forever. But that doesn't mean we should give up. Re-inhabitory stories show us a way forward. They build bridges across political divides. They connect us to our places and our non human neighbors. They acknowledge our complicity without letting us off the hook. Petronarratology reminds us that stories matter. The myth of energy has helped create our current crisis, but better stories, stories of reinhabitation, partnership, and neighborliness, can help us imagine and build a different future. The work of transitioning away from fossil fuels is not just about technology, it is about changing how we think, imagine, and tell stories. And that's something about literary scholars, storytellers, and ordinary people can all contribute.